agency and the partners, the government agencies as well as the organizations are here to lead this conversation. It's a conversation that I've had many times as a member of the State Senate. We passed the New York State Climate Protection and Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act a few years ago, and we continue to pass additional legislation every year to get our state on a path of zero emissions, meaning zero harm to the climate. But along the way, we need to have these kinds of discussions in the community because some of the laws have not only long-term impacts, but short-term impacts as well. We want to make it easier for everybody, whether they be residents or businesses or industry, to come into compliance with some of these rules that are, again, intended in the long term to leave the planet better for our kids and grandkids than we got it in the first place. So congratulations to all the organizers here. Thanks to all the attendees. It's a terrific turnout we have. Shout out to KAFSC also, because they are always here in force for the community. And yeah, let's give it up for KAFSC. And once again, thank you to CPC for organizing and hosting this important event. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, everybody else. Have a great discussion. Oh, and the mayor of Flushing is here now, TJ Lee. Come on up, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Would TJ like to speak?
Yeah, let him speak.
Oh, good job. Okay.
We also have Kyle Salcido from Congresswoman Ming's office in attendance. I know he'd like to say hello. And Ming Ren from Senator Stavisky's office, possibly not yet. Also, Xin Wu from City Council Member Sandra Ng's office. I invite you to speak.
Hi everyone, my name is Shane Wu. I'm from City Council Member Sandra Ng's office. On behalf of Councilwoman I would like to thank CPC, NOAA, and New York City Emergency Management for hosting this important meeting for residents to hear directly from climate experts on how to best prepare for the effects that climate change is having on our communities. Last week, we marked the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Ida, which is a devastating storm that not only caused immense property damage, but also took lives, including 3 people in our district who died when their basement got flooded. Unfortunately, severe weather events like this are only going to become more common. Events like this are important to provide information on how we can prepare and avoid tragedies like the one we saw in Ida and from occurring in the near future. The Councilwoman Ng's office is currently working with the EP to organize a public meeting in early October so that agency can provide information on storm mitigation efforts and for residents to voice their concerns and ask questions. We will also share more details as they become available. Lastly, thank you once again CPC, NOAA, and NYC Emergency Management for coordinating this meeting. The more informed we are and the more we will be prepared when the next extreme weather event occurs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Sylvia if you'd like to come and just briefly interpret the remarks from our elected.
你好，我是今天的翻译。如果有需要中文翻译的，麻烦你往前坐，因为我怕，我在那边讲，你们有些可能听得不是那么清楚。那待会呢，他会议开始的时候，他会有这个每一页的这个，我不知道你们手上有没有这样的一个简章，就是可以看。但是等一下我会按照他说的这个流程，就是一一的做翻译。那希望你们能够坐前面一点，这样可以听得比较详细。 哦，那个 OK， 所以等一下如果有需要中文翻译的人，请往前坐。那我会根据他等一下做简介的时候，每一页的简介来做翻译。谢谢。Thank you.
first speaker today will be Mitch Wu, who is the director of the Queens Community Services here at Chinese Planning Council. So let's welcome Mitch.
Thank you so much, Lily. Just want to first off thank again the organizers of tonight's events, our collaborators, Sea Grant New York, and also the New York City Office of Emergency Management. My name is Mitchell Wu. I'm the director of our Chinese American Planning Council CPC Queens Community Services. Welcome to our center here in downtown Flushing. I also want to thank all of the other community folks and other community organizations that also came out tonight, this afternoon, right? We're not going to go into the night, don't worry. This afternoon to attend this panel discussion as well. Just a little bit history about CPC. We are the nation's largest Asian American social service nonprofit agency, and we have over 50 programs in 33 site locations throughout Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. And we serve all 5 boroughs, over 120,000 New Yorkers. Now, during the times of the pandemic, we were hit pretty hard, and CPC actually maintained and continued our services, and one of which was also the impacts of Hurricane Ida, right? One thing I'd like to know was earlier this year in March, actually, me and Senator Liu were actually right on the corner of Casina Boulevard and Peck Avenue, right there where there was actually in front of one of the households where there were actually some casualties, right, from the hurricane, and talking about, the importance of understanding providing relief and also understanding what climate change actually means, In fact, Queens, the borough got hit one of the hardest, right, in terms of the damages and casualties overall from all these recent spikes in climate changes, from Hurricane Ida going all the way back to Hurricane to talk, but also wanted to also highlight my staff as well. We do have Marilla Lee right here, our Deputy Director of Queens Community Services, and also Bernice Ma, who's also in the back, and she was the person handing out the intake forms in the beginning. They've been supporting a lot of our community members throughout, all this time. In fact, when Hurricane Ida hit, CPC actually gave out over $110,000 to over 40 households, right, in regards to relief money. I know a lot of the other nonprofit organizations here will also, assisting and providing resources and help with regards for that as well. We also have Peter Chang, our director of our senior services right here, also in Queens as well. And Peter's also going to be talking to you a lot about, the impacts of this for his demographic population, the people that he serves. I know Peter has been, really fighting to preserve our CPC site here to still be a cooling station in the summertime, right? And so all this is really connected to, climate change and the impact, particularly for Queens, particularly for our immigrant communities that we serve. So at this time, I just want to let Peter speak. And this is also our senior center space right now that you guys are in as well. So if you see some of the artwork, these are all the programs that we produce for our senior folks, and Peter is the person that really organizes and does that. So Peter.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you. Again, my name is Peter Jim. I'm director of the Senior Center here. The Senior Center was established back in 1977, and we are serving 3,000 seniors every year. For Hurricane Ida, we have personal experience about the hurricane because the Senior Center was flooded. The first floor was up to 1 foot in water. When after Ida hit and the basement were all flooded, our elevator was down, and it took us like many months before we can fix the elevator. So this is something that's hit very close to home. Now, don't let people tell you that climate change is not real. I mean, look at Europe right now. The rivers are drying up in Europe, and in China, the heat is so much, and even in New York City, we never had a string of so many 90-degree hot days in New York City for this summer. So this is something that's happening, something that's real, and we better pay attention to it. And I would like to introduce the next speaker, Daniel Bader, who is the program manager for the Consortium for Climate Risk in the Urban Northeast. Let's welcome Daniel.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for having me come and talk to you today. Again, I'm Dan. I'm a scientist at Columbia University, where I manage a large NOAA research program project, which is focused on scientists engaging with stakeholders, including members of the community, to deliver the best possible climate information for which planning can then take place. My presentation is going. Yeah, just curious.
他现在要开始他的这个讲解的部分。那他刚刚讲的就是说，我们要看气候变迁对我们现在社区，对我们现在居住的社区有什么样的影响，跟我们需要怎么样关注我们对我们居住的人在这里就是刚刚他们也提到的是上城市的这些风灾造成有一些是特别是航空之间的居民有造成很大的一个伤害。那我们去帮助我们所在的这个区域的人，做一个紧急应变的措施，跟怎么就是救这样的人，或在这样子事情发生之前，我们做一个什么计划来避免伤害。
If we go to the next slide, I'm going to start the presentation by introducing the two different types of flooding that we experience here in New York City. Most of the speakers have been focused on Hurricane Ida and the remnants from that storm. That was an example of inland or urban flooding, which is coming from extreme or mean precipitation events. We also experience
现在我们很多人都在关注说之前上次的一个风灾跟水灾造成的我们的社区有什么影响，但是我们现在要了解说，现在纽约市对于以后即将会发生的一些灾害是什么样的应对措施，我们今天要来做探讨。
We also experience flooding from coastal events, so flooding along our north and south shore coast here in the city. That can be caused by sea level rise, just the mean increase in sea levels, and also from coastal storms. In the cold season, coastal storms are nor'easters, and in the warm season, which we're presently in, are tropical high cyclones or hurricanes. This would be an example of flooding from Hurricane Sandy.
所以我们也会讲到说，有些在靠海岸边的这些居民，他们遇到这些风灾跟水灾的时候，他们的状况什么样？就像我们刚刚看到的 hurricane， 就是那个飓风对我们所在区域的影响是不一样的。
And I want to emphasize that if we take climate change and what's causing these events out of the picture for a moment, we're vulnerable now. We experience these events now. We've experienced them in the past, and they're going to be with us in the future. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the future may look like. But just our vulnerability now justifies the need to think about this and how we then prepare to protect ourselves so that when these events happen in the future, because they're going to occur, we minimize any damage to the fullest extent.
所以气候变迁造成我们所在的区域在过去所发生的，跟我们即将以后未来或许会发生的，那我们怎么样做一些措施来预防或避免有那样重大的伤害？
So we're going to focus on inland or urban flooding. This is the flooding that again occurred during Hurricane Ida. It's where there's heavy rainfall events. It also can be caused by rainfall on top of snow. So sometimes in the winter we have a snowstorm and then it rains right on top of that. That melting snow plus the rainfall can lead to flooding.
所以我们也讲到说，当有一些飓风或者有一些暴风的时候，特别是在冬天比如说雪融的时候，造成我们的这个区域的淹水或一些危难的这个状况的话，我们怎么样去避免？
It's also important to remember that while we're concerned immediately what happens here in New York City, when we talk about flooding in our water system, our drinking water is coming from upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains, where our reservoirs are located. So we very much have to be concerned about what rainfall is there. Right now we are in a period of drought. We're classified as drought 2 across most of the New York City metropolitan region. Even this Tuesday's rainfall really didn't put much of a dent in the rain. So water shortage, which is the focus of this event, where we're looking at the opposite extreme of flooding, is very much a consideration we have to take into account.
所以我们也关注到，比如说在降雨量，它造成我们一些饮用水的需求。比如说前2天我们有一个 上升过来。那它这些会不会造成我们水资源的一些破坏，或者影响我们饮用水的需求？那这些都是我们需要去关注的。对未来有这方面的影响的话，我们需要去特别关注。
And some of the impacts, many of which we're familiar with, are just transit disruptions, flooding on the rail, flooded from rainfall that gets into the subway tunnels or on the tracks, combined sewer combined sewer overflows when wastewater enters the water bodies surrounding New York City, when the sewage system can't handle the increased runoff.
所以我们也讲到说，在一些暴雨的期间，其实它会造成我们比如说一些隧道或者地铁的影响，那还有造成我们居民饮用水的需求的时候，那我们应该怎么样去避免在这些饮用水的需求短缺的情况，要怎么样做一个措施？
And unfortunately, a lot of times, what we see in these recent extreme weather events like Ida is it illustrates or it brings to the surface risks that we didn't really think about. So basement flooding in the dwellings beneath the ground was really exacerbated, and it wasn't something that was really at the forefront of planners' minds. It wasn't kind of the top issue. And the same thing happened following Hurricane Sandy when there were fuel shortages. And a lot of gas stations actually had fuel, they didn't have power, so they couldn't pump the fuel. So it's these type of unforeseen impacts that we really want to kind of think ahead so that we prepare for the next event so that doesn't occur again.
所以我们也探讨到之前我们有 Sandy 风灾的时候，它造成我们的电冰箱爆炸，然后造成我们的供电短缺。那相对的，我们在这一次我们要先提早去预防，做一些措施应变措施，避免如果到以后有同样类似的情形发生的时候，我们应该怎么做紧急救难的措施？
The next type of flooding to talk about is coastal flooding. This is not a primary concern here in Flushing. We are located on the Long Island Sound, but it doesn't flood like the southern parts of the city does. But the two primary causes for coastal flooding in the city are just the mean sea levels rising. Sea level rise in New York City has been about, we'll talk about that on the next slide, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself there. But,
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So how much is the mean sea level rise in the past 50 years?
Do you want to translate my part of the answer?
我们今天要探讨的就是说，是什么原因导致我们有这些不同的比如说不同的暴风啊，或气候变迁影响的一些负载或淹水的这些状况。
The question is how much has sea level rise in New York City been in the past century, approximately?
50 years.
50
yeah.
years?
Since 1970s,
I can't give you
75.
I don't know the figure from the 70s, but the 100-year trend, about the past 120 years, let's say, has been about just above a foot. So we've seen a foot of sea
It's
level
1 foot,
rise.
right?
It's about a foot, so it's probably, I don't know the breakdown of when it occurred. I will say that 1 foot of sea level rise may not seem significant, but
And
this-
actually, I'm sorry to break you. Actually, the sewer system was built in the 1970s, so it should be checked down to 50 years ago.
It's a it's a challenge, you know, in an urban area like New York City, where you have infrastructure that's on capital cycles that aren't replaced year after year after year. Some of the equipment and some of the facilities that are built are before the sea level has really started accelerating, and that's a challenge that we're facing, and that's why we're thinking about how the next time it's due to be built, that we make sure we're incorporating these numbers. And I can tell you firsthand that our numbers that we put together as scientists are translating directly into city policy and programming. We have a well-established relationship with the mayor's office, and because of that, the latest data is being used for the city's future preparedness.
Well, my question is, it's only a rise only 1 foot also. So why everything is because of climate? While actually the infrastructure is not enough, it's because it's overbuilt of the neighborhood.
There's certain
So we are very frustrated that nothing is being done, and the city, the mayor's plan has nothing for Flushing to upgrade the sewer.
I'm not a city official, unfortunately, so I cannot comment on the policy. So I unfortunately unable to answer.
Because you guys everything talking about climate, but nothing is really done for us. and our life
Again-
is in danger all the time.
Again, I don't know the policy side of things.
我们今天要探讨的是气候变迁导致我们社区会有什么样的一些风灾、水灾有一些的状况。那我们希望先告诉我们怎么样，如果有类似的地区发生，我们怎么去做预防。那至于刚刚那位小姐问的这些问题，因为他刚刚是这样子有讲说，有些我们的措施都是很久以前就已经建好，那其实系统上并没有做任何的新的改变。那在这个部分，他是没有办法回答刚刚的。
那我不是说，他说的是过去100年才长了不到1米1尺的那个水，可是我们那个苏尔是70年，就是说那时候长，我们从那建到现在还没到不到1尺，为什么只是就着重那个水的那个 climate 呢？而实际的情况他们不丢脸，我从来没有听到任何的帮助对我们。
你要问的可以等之后再问，谢谢。
Just to wrap up this side, the other form of coastal flooding experiences during hurricanes and normal series or some of the larger surge events do occur. This can cause significant flooding and inundation of coastal locations. I do want to point out that we're at a point in New York City where we have what's being referred to as sunny day flooding. So it's a bright sunny day like it is today, and we have a full moon coming up in 2 or 3 days, I believe is the next tidal cycle. And parts of the Rockaways, Howard Beach, Hamilton Beach are underwater just from the mean sea level rise that we've experienced here. So it's becoming a question of, are these areas habitable 50 to 100 years?
Yeah, but not our case. Our house is 15 feet above the mean sea level.
I understand that.
So why you want to migrate us for that?
I again cannot comment on the policy of what the city is doing or not doing, and I'm here to introduce, more generally speaking, the risks of climate change to the city as a whole.
Yeah, we will gladly answer some of those questions, and have some answers.
Okay.
But I want to finish after Dan finishes. Okay, we'll be gladly answer your question.
I'm just going to give you some context of what we've seen in the past, what we're experiencing now, what's projected for the future. In the Northeast United States, which includes New York City, we've seen approximately a 70% increase in extreme rainfall events. This is something you may have observed. When it rains now, it seems to be raining a lot harder.
所以我们现在就是要告诉你说，在过去、现在跟未来，它要探讨的这个淹水的状况，比如说现在的淹水状况是比以前过去的情形更严重。那就像刚刚他有讨论到，在这种气候这么好的情况下，或者在有些海岸、有些区域，它会不会也会有淹水或水倒灌的这个情形发生？这个都是我们今天要探讨的部分。
That 70% is from what year is that?
It's approximately 1950 or 1960. It's from the U.S. National Climate Assessment, the 4th assessment report. I know that the updated climate science report released earlier this year has a bit of a new figure. So that's a bit outdated. It's approximately the same. In New York City, we're projected to see both an increase in average rainfall and also extreme precipitation events. And we have to consider that as our climate warms, any snowfall events may become rainfall events, and also snow may be accelerated as well.
所以我们也探讨在气候暖化的情况下，如果有一些雨水的比如说降雨的状况导致会淹水或怎么样的情况，都是我们待会要探讨的。
Coastal flooding, we talked about sea level rise increasing. Projections are for an acceleration of sea level rise in the future. Some of the high-end estimates are close to 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet by the end of the century. That's a really kind of high-end extreme scenario. Even without any changes in storms themselves, which are very uncertain, we'd still see an increase in coastal flooding just due to the mean sea levels rising on their own. And
所以我们现在也探讨到，就是说过去的情况可能跟就是淹水的这个量跟过去来比较的话，它是说过去假设我们 希望高到或多少，它的一个折旧是我们不一定能够知道，大概我差不多这个都是能搞定。
And just to kind of wrap things up and illustrate what perhaps could be the worst case scenario for the citywide, here in Flushing, the January dangerous is going to be heavy downpour events like the Ida flooding, a slow-moving, heavy rainfall storm that drops many inches of rain over a very short period of time. But the two most recent storms that impact prior to Ida were Sandy and Irene. Sandy's primary damage was wind focus and also coastal inundation. Irene, the primary impact was rainfall. You can imagine a storm that brings both the coastal flooding and the rainfall together. That's kind of our extreme scenario, what we don't want to see, let's say, because it would combine the impacts of both coastal and inland flooding at the same time.
我们也讲到就是两个不同的风灾造成的状况，第一个就是比如说海岸线它旁边这边降雨量刚好，再来是刚好，另外一个是我们看到就是说在很短的时间内降雨量一下子骤降太多，那导致我们在进行救难的过程情况下，我们会用这样的一个应对时间。
With that, I don't know if we have any questions now. I'll be around afterwards to answer any questions you may have. All the information I talked about is available on our website, CC Run, and you can
所以谢谢你们今天有没有问题？然后我们现在看到我们的网页上的那些网站，如果你有什么任何问题可以发言他们，或者是在。
Yeah, it's just the same question. So our house in Flushing was flooded in 15 minutes, and 3 people kept killed. And our elevation here is 15 feet above the mean sea level. So why you're not addressing the sewer problem for us instead of telling us to move out of the area?
I'm a scientist, so my job as a scientist is to communicate to a policymaker of what the science says. It's for a policymaker to decide what to do with that information. I've been in this job for 14 years, working with the mayor's office since day one. They're if not the most progressive, one of the top 3 cities working on cities and climate planning. They're getting the latest data we have. Unfortunately, in our environment, there are events that occur that surprise us, that exacerbates risks we didn't know about. What our job as scientists is to clearly communicate that information, and then it's on the policymakers to thereby act upon it. Following, I will say, and I'm sure there's some local government officials here that can comment further than I can, the city released within 2 months of the storm a comprehensive report with plans of how to respond to post-Ida flooding, and the work has continued to this day.
Excuse me, I have one question. I'm sorry. So the data, can we have the data too? Then I want to make sure that's the way it is.
The data that we provide to the city.
Yeah. You said
The
it's 70%
data-
more increase, right? I want to see the facts.
The data is
And
all
the
available.
storm Ida is a 100-year storm, the
The data
intensity.
that we work with is
So
all.
it's
all
not
of our-
like this is the only time happening in history. In the past, they also happened too.
All of our data that we provide in our reports for the city is freely available and publicly accessible online through the New York City Council on Climate Change, the Mayor's Office of Resiliency, or it's now Climate and Environmental Justice, I apologize. All of the data we work with is also publicly accessible through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, so that's readily accessible online.
And also I see that the mayor's plan that they don't have anything for us.
I again cannot comment.
We are the
on that,
most,
unfortunately, I wish I could.
yeah, they don't have nothing for us.
Thank you. What's your name?
Min Yi-san.
Mimi-san. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm very sorry to hear about the loss in your house, and you're bringing up very important issues. some of which I'm gonna address, and we have also a team from New York City Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. They're gonna address some of the issues, but you're right, until Ida, we have not had a plan for basement flooding. The city, as Dan mentioned, put together a report. Our agency helped out, the mayor's office, which is now for climate and environmental justice. They also contributed. We're gonna share some of that information here. DEP also put out Rainfall Ready. We're gonna cover some of it here. I know some people asked for my presentation, which is to come, and we can send you that presentation. Then also I have links that I sent to Lily and Marilla, and those will accompany the presentations. So perhaps let's just start a little bit, if our colleagues from DEP could come up here. And
We
they
don't
have
need
not been
anything. We need a
prepared for this,
sewer
they're a
built for
different
us.
team, but your concerns are so important and so valid. I just want to say that, if you
Thank
can
you.
express that. Sylvia, thank you.
我们现在就是待会他会进行他今天要讲的内容。那根据你刚刚所提问的，他有那个不同的部门叫Department of whatever， 他们会回答你刚刚问的一些问题，但有些或许没有办法完整的告诉你。但他今天我们讲的内容，他会有一个链接，你会上去看到我们今天所讲的内容，会在跟题目一样。
Thank you. Yeah, as said, we are from the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm Charles Sturkin, Director of Environmental Compliance and Outreach in this city.
I'm Tommy Lynn, I'm the Principal Coordinator for DEP within Community Affairs.
As far as the long-term projects that the city is doing to stem flooding, we have been working since 2010, 2012 on what we call green infrastructure planning and construction.
所以我们现在他们是从环保局那边过来的，然后我们会探讨一些有关绿色建筑的问题，然后也会根据你刚刚所提问的，或许会告诉你，有一些能解答，有些不一定能够完全回答你。
对我们
So stormwater
I need to I don't need this green thing. Yeah, it's good to have green things, right? But we need the sewer. It's right now the main problem is the sewer cannot take the water. The water shoot out from the manhole. That DEP is responsible for giving us
So
a sewer big enough for the storm. We didn't get it.
The sewer system is part of the green infrastructure plan. There's a national crisis with stormwater control. This is not just happening in New York City. And as Dan could tell you, there are many communities that are suffering with the sewer systems controlling stormwater during extraordinary storms. Because the designs were created 50, 100 years ago. And up until recently, major storms were able to be handled. And I can point to one example of where we constructed large sewers in Flushing.
所以我们也跟你说到，就是它原先的一些建筑的这些东西都是100年前建设的。那对于我们现在所面临到的这些近期比较提到的这两个暴风雨的这个灾害的话，它不一定能够及时的做到完整的一个预防。但是我们现在就是尽可能的告诉你说，往后的如果有类似的这个状况发生，他们能够有应变的措施。
I tell you the truth, I used to work at DEP, okay? I was in the sewer design department. I know exactly the problem is. But for 25 years, nothing is done for us. It's been lying to my neighborhood and causing our suffering.
Well, we do look at flooding in different areas, particularly Southeast Queens is an area of tremendous flooding. And we've invested about $2 billion to build out the sewer system to that area, draining into Jamaica Bay. It's a large drainage area. But we have spent billions of dollars building out the sewers. Now, the stormwater, we want to take that off of the sewer system as much as we can. And we've installed 1,200 rain gardens and green infrastructure elements around the city. If you take the stormwater off the sewers, you're going to have more capacity in your sewers. In addition to building out the system, it's like the branches of a tree. You have the trunk of a tree, is the main sewer. Comes from North Queens to the south to Jamaica Bay and into Flushing Bay. And then the construction is to build branches as much as you can to comply with the development, large-scale developments going on in Flushing over the last 20 years. That means you have to build sewers more to handle the capacity of the increased buildings and population. So we do factor that in, and if you know the design components, you do look at that when you're building out the city.
Yeah, you have built a big facility in the Flushing Park, the CSO facility, right? But that one doesn't resolve anything, doesn't increase any capacity of the sewer that you need to carry the water away.
We do increase the capacity of the sewers after drainage studies are done of what can handle the flow.
There's a lot, there's infrastructure underneath the park of Casino Park and Casino Corridor.
Yeah, in
That
Flushing, Corona,
capacity hasn't been increased since 1996, the big storm almost killed people.
we're
And this time,
continually
because
building
nothing
hundreds
is
of
done,
miles of sewers every year.
yeah, but you didn't do anything for us.
Thank you for your question. DEP is actually tabling and we can help continue this conversation. I see there's one more question, so.
No, I just have a request. Can we table the questions under the speaker after he finished presenting before we answer the questions? Because it interrupts the flow of the event. I don't have all day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we can have a question. So thank you so much for the impromptu speaking, yes, and DEP is available for questions, and I do appreciate all of them. I'd like to move on. I'd like to introduce Jill Cornell. I know she came up earlier, but she's with New York City Emergency Management. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Hello, everybody. Are you ready, Flushing? This is what's your plan. So I'm going to talk about individual and community preparedness, not about the sewers right now.
现在我们要探讨的是，好像是你准备好了吗？现在的这个主要讲解的内容是关于下水道的问题，所以我们现在要探讨的内容是关于法拉盛，你是不是准备好我们以后即将发生的一些问题，我们是不是制定好一些计划、一些措施来预防或避免？
Thank you for joining today to learn more about climate and emergency preparedness.
谢谢你今天来参与，就是有关气候变迁造成我们的失去影响，我们应该怎么样制定一个措施。
I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do.
所以他现在告诉你我们是谁，我们要我们会做什么样的措施。
New York City Emergency Management helps New Yorkers before, during, and after emergencies through preparedness, education, and response.
所以纽约受灾中心他们是帮助纽约的居民在发生任何的救灾状况之前或之后做应变的时候，或关于怎么教导你们怎么回应这样子的状况时候，你应该做什么样的措施？
We're responsible for coordinating citywide emergency planning and response for all types and scales of emergencies. And we have more than 200 dedicated professionals, you have 2 of them here, with diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise, including individuals assigned from other agencies.
所以我们这里现在有超过200个不同的专业的一些机构的专家，包含个别的或是具体的一些不同的机构如果有这些紧急的状况发生，他们能够来做一些协助。
So the image on this slide shows some citywide incident coordinators at a large fire in front of a building with fire trucks.
所以现在你看到的这个页面呢，他看到就是纽约市紧急救灾，他们有一些活 火灾的状况，它做一个什么样的定位？
So I'm here today as part of our public education team. I work in the Community Engagement Bureau on community preparedness. We help local networks build community capacity to prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies.
我是在做社区用难的这个部门。那我们的这个部门主要是帮助做当地社区的联系或沟通或建立一个这样子的需求或者问题状况的话，他们能够做一个什么样的协助？
And we targeted Flushing. I'm deviating from the script, Sylvia, but we knew that Flushing got hit very hard, and we worked very hard to connect to Flushing, and we were so grateful to Chinese Branding Council to invite us and to host us in here, and to connect what's happening to climate. And our job on my team is to help you prepare for the next one.
因为我们知道法拉盛这一次的这个风灾或水灾造成一个很大的伤害，那我们这个机构很高兴跟华盛会有共同的就是建立这样子的一个活动，来告诉你怎么样去预防避免以后任何类似的灾害造成的时候，他们能够怎么样做协助。
The other part of our bureau is the Ready New York team, and they do the public information campaign, and that's for individuals and families. What I'm about to do today are some of the highlights, and just to take a poll right now, how many people have done a Ready New York training here?
有多少在座多少人已经有做过？
If you've done a Ready New York training, please raise your hand.
麻烦你举下手，如果你做过这样子的训练，
That's why it's important for me to be here, and for my boss, Mariah Washington, there in the back to be here. Now, on the left side of the slide, you see a gentleman in green shirt and green shirts.